we learnt about all the file system, how the file system works. So Angular application related all the file system we discussed. Next, after understanding the file system, the basic infrastructure, today we will see Angular framework components, means Angular framework components. Generally, when you are learning any language, actually, when you are learning about two important basics, like if you are learning a language, you are learning a library and you are learning a framework. So that means in computer technologies, when you are learning language, what we have to learn in a language? Usually, language is about variables, data types, operators, statements, functions, or if it is object related, OOP concepts and all. If it is a library, if you are learning a library, for example, jQuery, React, so all these are libraries. In a library, what is there to learn? What we have to learn as a developer? In a library, what you will learn? It's not a language. In a library, what you will learn? What library provides for a developer? Usually, library provides all predefined functions. Library provides predefined functions. For every purpose, we have ready-made functions. We have to use those functions and build the application. That means it provides data and function. Library comprises of data and function. Language contains variables, data types, operators, and all this. What framework contains? If you are learning a framework, like some technology says that I am a framework, then what is there in a framework to learn? Various frameworks are there. So what is there in a framework to learn? What is framework about? If I say Angular is a framework, then what is there in a framework to learn? Framework is not a language. Framework uses a language. Framework is not a library. Framework uses library. Then what is there in a framework to learn? Actually, framework means every framework comprises of factories. A framework contains factories. It contains services. Framework, here in our Angular framework, we have pipes. So we have components. We have templates. We have another is about modules. Technically, in a framework, we have so many things. We have directives. Let's keep these modules at the end here. Anywhere you directives. All these are the components of framework. That means what is there in Angular to learn. That means you are learning Angular means what you are going to learn. Angular is already using the language TypeScript. Already we know TypeScript. Then what is there in Angular to learn? So framework comprises of all these things. We have factories, services, pipes, components, templates, directives, modules. All these comes under framework. Angular framework specially contains all these. Right. Now, what are factories, service? We will detailedly learn. We will discuss one by one. We will learn about them. But I will just give you first an overview. Technically, what are these? Actually, factories, technically factories are nothing but a factory. A factory is a set of values and functions. A factory is a set of values and functions. Related type of values and functions are kept in a factory. Related type of values and options are kept in a factory. Factory contains set of values and functions. Related type of values and functions we keep in a factory. But we cannot use factories directly in the project because factories use a single call mechanism. Single call mechanism means every time when you need a function, you need to create an object. Through that object, you have to access. Later detail I will explain that when we learn about them. I'm just giving one point about these components because we are going to deal with them. We will learn detailedly about them. Factory contains set of functions. So by using these functions, we build the application. But factories cannot be directly used in project because generally what happens is why we cannot use factory directly in the project is actually factory contains set of functions and set of values. And if I want to use these factories in various locations, if I want to use these factories, then what we have to do is every time I need to create an object. Every time I need to create an object, through that object, we need to access the factory. I want one more time, then I have to create another object. So I have to create another object and another object. Every time I need to create an object whenever I require these functions. That means every time when you need the function, you have to create an object. Through that object, you can access it. This mechanism, we call it as single call. We call it as single call. This mechanism we call as single call. So this is not a good idea every time creating an object and calling. So then what we do is we inject this factory. Generally what we do is we inject this factory into a service. So service is a collection of factories. Service is a collection of factories. We inject all the factories into a service. We inject all the factories into a service. What is advantage of service is service uses singleton mechanism. Service uses singleton mechanism. Service uses a singleton mechanism. Service uses a singleton mechanism. Right? So 1 second. Everyone can see the screen online shared. It's already shared. Is it okay? Everyone can see the screen now? Yes. Yes. It is. Yeah, it is visible to everyone. If anyone cannot see, check your side, right? Right. Fine. Let's continue. So technically, what is factory and what is service? Service, generally what happens is service uses singleton mechanism. Singleton mechanism means object is created only for the first request and the same object will be used across any number of requests. Object is created for the first request and the same object is used for all the requests. So it is always important to use a service instead of using a factory directly. So service is nothing but it is a set of factories. Service is a set of factories. Detailedly we will learn because we have to know about all these individually. First I am giving one line overview about them. So brief, so that later we will discuss. So a framework contains factories and services. Factories contains set of related type of functions and a set of related type of factories are kept in a service. We inject the services and use them in our application. Actually, factory uses, as I told you, it uses single call mechanism, whereas services it uses singleton mechanism. So technically, factories and services. Angular framework provides pipes. Pipe. It is used to filter, sort, and format data. Pipes are used in Angular for filtering, sorting, and formatting the data. So when we have data, actually we need to format the data, filter the data, sort the data by using lot of functions. But Angular now provides a simple technique of doing that, and Angular calls it as pipes. So pipes are used for filtering, sorting, and formatting the data. For that we have pipes. Next, components. Yesterday I already explained. Components, it provides UI components. UI component means, already I told you, it comprises of markup, it comprises of styles, and it comprises of logic. Markup is defined in HTML, styles are defined in CSS, and logic is in TypeScript. Now, we also have template. Actually, template is designed. It is a set of components. By using a set of components, we design a template so that we can use that template anywhere. We can individually use the components or we can use the templates. Another important, directives. These are they have different roles actually. Directives actually used for directive, it is used for extending markup. It is used for extending markup. That means already markup is doing some work to make the markup more effective. That means you can simply say that directive converts static, it converts static DOM into dynamic. These directives are responsible for converting the static DOM into dynamic DOM. So they are used to extend the markup. They are used for extending markup. Lot of works directives will do. We will understand about them while learning it, right? Another important, we have modules. It is a module. It is a set of factories, services, pipes, components, everything. All are kept in a module. Already we learnt module system. We'll discuss about module system. Modules is a collection of classes, functions, variables, and everything. It contains contracts, it contains services and everything. So module is a set of factories, services, pipes, everything are kept in a module. That means if you want a set of components and pipes and services to use somewhere, then you have to take them with the help of module. We design a module and we import that module in wherever location we want, and we can use all of them. So Angular framework typically contains all this. So learning Angular is all about these framework components: factories, services, pipes, components, templates, directives, and modules. And not only that, learning framework comes with some more techniques. We will learn about those techniques also. Learning a framework is about framework components and some framework techniques. We have to learn some techniques. Techniques means actually Angular framework techniques. Any technology in the world which says it is a framework, it contains some components and it contains some techniques. Usually Angular framework techniques. So some important techniques that you will learn in Angular framework, we call those techniques as data binding. We call as style binding. We call as event binding. We call as routing and security. All these comes under techniques, right? Data binding, style binding, event binding, routing, security. So, and of course, like state management. All these comes under techniques. That means if anybody asks what is routing, it is a technique used in framework for handling navigation. What is data binding? It is a technique. What is style binding? It is a technique. So what is state management? It is a technique. Why these techniques are used? For handling different types of functionalities. For satisfying different types of functionalities, we need to use these techniques. So learning framework is all about components and techniques. You are learning a framework in any technology, Java frameworks, .NET frameworks, or any client side, server side frameworks. They include components and some techniques, right? In Angular, these are all the components. So these are the Angular components, and these are the Angular techniques. So learning Angular is about all this. So by the end of Angular, you will get complete knowledge of all this, right? What components I given here, what techniques I given here, you will learn about everything, right? So we are going to discuss and learn all these things in Angular, right? Now, once we know this, now we need to know about Angular application architecture. How Angular actually works, Angular application architecture. means how actually Angular application works, the basic application architecture. Actually, Angular architecture means official website people will give you one architecture diagram, how Angular works. That means official Angular people will give. But that is not enough for an expert to understand the complete functionality of Angular. So that is high level architecture. So you have to know very low level architecture of Angular application, that we will see level by level. In different levels we will understand. That means whenever you search for Angular architecture, you will get one diagram anywhere. Even official website also provides the same diagram. And what is the diagram is, that means what is Angular architecture diagram actually? Suppose see, we have, means first a rough concept I will explain. We have an Angular application. Now we need to design Angular application. To design Angular application, actually what happens is, as I already told you, generally we have factories. Factories means factory contains functions, factory contains values, right? Values and functions are kept in factories. Now what we do is, generally we inject these factories into services. We inject the factories into service. That means we create services. So, and we inject the factory into services. And generally application means it contains lot of services. Application is built with lot of services. It contains lot of services. Now what we do is, we need to use these services in our application. Then actually these services are injected into a component. These services are injected into a component. That means generally what we do is we design a component. And what this component actually contains. This component contains, as I already told you, markup, it contains styles, it contains TypeScript, and it contains some of the services that you need for your application. That means it may contain these services that you need for application. According to requirement, it may use. Not all services, whatever service is required, it will use. Now this component so is built into a template. That means I already told you that we design a templates. So we have template. So this template contains collection of several components. That means we build a lot of components and design a template. And these templates are used in your application. That means these templates are used in your application. So application is built by using this. Application is built by using this. That means we use a template. Template contains components. Components are built from services. Services will come from factories. And actually all these factory related functions and everything are kept in a module actually. So module contains factories, services, functions and everything. So this is the basic architecture that you will see every time when you look for Angular. That means how Angular application is built. Angular application is built by using this hierarchy. So Angular application is built with components. So those we can call it as template. Template is a collection of components. Components is a set of functionality and services. And service is a collection of factories. Factory is a collection of values and functions. That is the basic hierarchy. For example, see here, the basic Angular architecture. So how the Angular application looks like. Actually, this is the basic architecture diagram. This is the basic Angular architecture diagram. So we have modules, functions, services and all. We have services injected into components, and we build templates and we use the templates. I explained in a simple way. These are technical words. That means directive. That means how a template is used in an application. Template is used in an application by using a directive. Directives are used for embedding template into application. I am not explaining about how to put them. I am explaining about what it is built with, right? How to put them, that we will see. This is the diagram you will see regularly, but this doesn't give any good clarity for a learner. This is okay for a developer. The developer can understand this diagram, but a learner cannot understand this, right? That means generally websites, official websites, majority of architectural diagrams and all, they are for developers, not for learners. Not for learners. That means they are not tutorial websites. They provide help for not absolute freshers. They provide help for developers. In that case, majority of the tutorials online, not tutorials, official websites, what you see is a high level design. And it is not enough to understand for a fresher how it works actually. By seeing this, nobody can understand that how Angular works. Right? By seeing this diagram, nobody can understand how Angular works. Right? But if you learn the flow, then it is easy to handle. We will see how the application works. Yesterday you saw that we executed a project. When we executed a project, and automatically home screen came, right? In that app component is displayed, right? What is the architecture behind it? I will give you this diagram in class, right? In the class, I will upload this diagram, but better we have to understand the low level architecture, how it internally works, the low level architecture. If you can understand low level architecture, you can start building application. You cannot start building application by seeing this architecture. This never guides you that, right? Let's see. Let's see the correct low level architecture. This is official diagram. This is the official diagram given by Angular people. So about Angular architecture, but actually how it happens, I will show you. These diagrams I will upload into Classroom, right? So this is the diagram one. Okay. I will upload this, but I will show you the clear application flow, because by learning the flow only you can start building application. See, actually what happens is, generally we have an Angular application. So we have an Angular application. This is an Angular application, and the basic flow I will give you here. Now this is the browser. This is the browser. Now from a browser, so user will request that application. Yesterday you saw that to access that application, we used this local host and 4200. That is the request we made from browser, because Angular application by default running at this location, Generally what happens is, when you make a request from browser like this request will come to a web server. This request will come to web server. It comes to web server, or you call as HTTP server. The request will come to web server, or you call it as HTTP server. Actually, your application is hosted on that server. That means your Angular application is running on web server. That server address is localhost 4200. That is the server address. When client request comes to the web server, the request comes to the web server. When client request comes to web server, in the web server, it actually contains a HTTP processing pipeline. We have a HTTP processing pipeline. Generally, this HTTP processing pipeline is responsible for processing the request made by the client. How it will process the request made by client? By using a handler. This pipeline uses a handler. We call it as HTTP handler. It uses an HTTP handler. It uses an HTTP handler. By using HTTP handler, this HTTP processing pipeline will process the request. When client makes a request, the request will come to the HTTP processing pipeline. This pipeline is going to process your request with the help of a HTTP handler. HTTP handler is going to manage the request from the client, where it will manage the request in pipeline, where the pipeline is maintained in the web server. Now, what happens is here, it's a little lengthy one to understand here. Generally, you have an application. So we have an Angular application. Now what we do is, in this Angular application, see, in this Angular application contains some set of components. Like we have a home component, we have a login component, like that I told you. But when we created application, by default it contains which component? When created application, it contains app. It contains an app component. By default, every Angular application comes with app component. It comes with app component. Okay. And one more option is, you have seen that there is a page called index.html. That is the page which is delivered to the client, right? Now, what happens is, this application will maintain, application usually maintains, every application it maintains a table. We call it as route table. Every application maintains a route table. It maintains a route table. This route table contains information about the path and information about the component to deliver. That means when user requests this, deliver this. When user requests that, deliver that. That means when user requests, so / some home, then deliver home component. When user requests login, can deliver login component. That means route table contains information about what are the paths that this application can serve. What are the paths that application can serve? That information is present in a route table. So that means you request something, everything it cannot serve. Application cannot serve everything that you requested. It can serve only what it contains. That means application, what it can serve. That means people will make different requests, but what application can serve, that is decided by this route table. Route table contains information about what are the paths ready to serve. What application can serve. that is given in the route table. So generally what happens is when a client makes a request, actually client path is this 4200. When client makes a request, handler will take that path. What is that path? It is localhost, and in that port number is 4200. And in that, if any specific path like they requested home or something, that means like this the path will be there. Now what happens is, now handler will take help of a special engine. We call that as a routing engine. Angular have a routing engine. This routing engine is going to take the request and it is going to verify inside the route table, is that available or not. Whatever the request made by client, it will be verified by the routing engine. So we have a route engine. This route engine is responsible for verifying the path requested by the client with the route table. That means if the path requested by client is available in the route table, that means application can serve it. If it is not available, then obviously this route engine will make the status codes like 200. I hope you know 200 is for okay. It makes the request like 404 means not found. It makes the request like 302 like it is method. So many types of request status codes will be there. Now the point here is routing engine is verifying whether the path requested by client is available with application or not. If it is not available with application, that means it will see that you requested something and it is not there in the route table. Then immediately this routing engine will prepare a status code saying that 404 and send that status code as a response to the client saying that not found. That means whatever you are requesting, it is not available. It will show that option. So technically what happens, you make a request from the browser, request will come to processing pipeline. In the processing pipeline, your request will be managed by handler. This handler will process the request and verify the path using a routing engine from the route table. And if route table says that that path is available, that means that component is available. Now what will happen? That means if it is not available, status code goes saying that not found. If it is available, then what will happen? If it is available, now what happens in Angular application is, actually in Angular application, first Angular application loads all the library required. It loads all the library required for this application, from where it will identify what library is required for the application. It will verify that from a file called app.module.ts. app.module.ts. That means every Angular application contains a file called app.module.ts. This file contains information about what is the library required for the current application. What is the library required for the current application? It will verify that. After verifying whatever the library required for the current application, then what happens is, this is going to use the help of injector. It is going to take the help of injector. So that means it will take help of injector. What injector will use is, actually injector uses a dependency injection mechanism. Dependency injection mechanism means it contains provider and injector. Two things will be there. Detailedly what injector will do later I will tell you. That is very low level, right? Now what injector will do is, injector is going to do two things. This injector is going to load the module. It is load the module and compile the module. Loading and compiling the module is done by using load module and compile the module. It is done by injector. That means now injector will take help of a compiler. Actually, the compiler used by the injector in Angular is Babel. Babel is the name of compiler. JavaScript based technologies, majority use the compiler like Babel. Babel is very popular. React, Angular, everybody uses the same Babel. Babel is the popular compiler. This is Babel. It is the JavaScript compiler. Any technology in the world which is using JavaScript as a language for the technology, it can go with this compiler, Babel compiler, right? Actually, various types of compilers will have. So we have a compiler called V8. V8 is very popular compiler for JavaScript based. Babel is one compiler, right? It depends your requirement, but majority of JavaScript applications use this Babel. That is the compiler. Now what happens is, with the help of injector and with the help of this compiler, what injector will do? It will load the module and it will compile the module. If there are no errors in the module, what it will do is it will load the component. Because remember, module contains so many things. It contains pipes, it contains services and everything. But interface is, a module contains lot of things. A module contains services, factories, pipes, so many things. But the interface is provided by component. What client needs is interface. He needs to see the interface. From interface only he will interact. That means clients will interact with your application through an interface, and that interface is component. That means it will load this component. Where it will load the component? Load component into index.html. It will load the component into index.html. And after loading the component into index.html, this index.html is delivered as a response to the client. This index.html is delivered as a response to the client browser. Of course, it will go through all this process only. Through the handler only it will go. Handler will send it as a response. That means finally what user is watching on the screen? He is watching on the screen index.html. That is how actually the low level process works. This is not complete low level. In low level also I given highlights. Internally, what handler does, what route table does, how route engine works. If you say I am experienced person, 5 years, 10 years experienced, then I can take your entire interview on this architecture only. Not complete architecture. I can take your entire interview on this just web server and handler. I can revolve around this web server and handler and screw you. Right? That means you say I am experienced 10 years, 5 years, then I can screw you in this two topics itself. Enough. right? You can't handle, because at that level of experience, he must be genius in all this architecture part, right? Many people ask, sir, at the end of course, will you send some experience interview questions and answers? What do you think? It is like question bank. You prepare for a few questions and answers he will ask. Many people ask this regularly. Interview questions and answers. What do you think? So that is a question bank. That 10 questions you prepare and go, they will ask. Majority of experienced people interviews. Remember 2 points: fresher, concept, and experienced people, architecture. That's it. Freshers are asked questions on concept. What is component? What is service? What is module? Experienced person, how component works. Tell me the architecture behind the component. How service works. Tell me the architecture of service. What is required for a service? What is a provider? What is an injector in service? These things are asked. For a fresher, what is service? And for an experienced person, how service works. That is the questions. That means every experienced person must be strong in the architectural part, right? Many people think that when we teach these all things, many people think that, sir, when practical will start? That means they are very much excited in writing code without knowing architecture. What you will do? Nothing. Time waste. Writing code a kid also can do, right? We have websites. Who is this? So many companies are there online, like Byju's and all, right? A kid also can do coding. Then what is you? You as a developer need to be strong in the architecture, not coding. Coding, a small kid also can do coding. The point here is architecturally you need to be very strong. That is where your interviewer will test you in interviews, majority, right? Because without knowing architecture, it's useless about coding, right? That's the reason we need to first understand the flow. Now, I hope you know where to start. By seeing this diagram, now what do you think? In Angular application, so how the application starts, you understood the point. How the application starts. So the application starts, I given in this way, but our direction is right to left. Our direction is right to left. This direction I showed you left to right, that is client side. But as a developer side, your responsibility is building application. Building application means what you have to do, you have to build the components. We need to design the components and build an application. So after that, we need to configure routing. So after that, the application will be delivered to the client. That means our responsibility is to build application by using components, services, pipes, and everything, and define routing. Routing is also a very important part, but we ignored, if you remember, when we created a project, we ignored routing. If we ignored routing, what will happen? Manually, user have to request and only one page will be coming every time. That is index. Other components cannot be individually delivered. If you want other components individually delivered, then you have to design routing. As of now, for few days, our entire work will be on index page. We will build components, we will inject them into index page, and we will work with them. So this is the basic concept. And in this architecture, let me save this also. Angular diagram, right? Yeah. Now, this also I will upload into the classroom. This I will upload into classroom. Now, in this, this is the main part you need to understand. That means whatever the library required for your application, it is loaded by whom? app.module.ts. Now let's go to that file and see what actually it contains. Because in order to start Angular application, first you should know this file. You should know that file. Let's see open our project here. And in this project, our project Angular workspace. Yeah. In this workspace, yesterday we created an application, and that application, we created an application shopping. In that we have an app, in that app.module.ts. Now you see, as a Angular developer, first you need to understand this file. So you can see in this, these are all import. I don't need to explain them. You already learned module system. We learned module system. That means whatever modules we need to use, classes and functions we need to use, we have to import. Already it is importing, right? Now you can observe here, this is an ng module. ng module. Actually, we call it as architecture. I will upload here. After architecture, two diagrams will come. So high level and a low level diagram. I will upload those two diagrams, basic diagrams. Then actually now we are exploring this important, see, Angular directives. Detailedly we will discuss about directives. Angular directives, remember, let me give as a question, right? So what is a directive? That is a basic level. Later, detailedly directives also concept will come. Actually, in a framework, you can design various components. In a framework, you can design various components like services, like pipes, like factories, so like components, like modules. You can design various things. In a framework, you can design various components like all these. All these you can design. Now, the question here is, a compiler can, and better one more point I will see, every component of framework is a TypeScript class. Every component of framework is a TypeScript class. Every component of framework is a TypeScript class. That means factory is a class. Service is a class. So we have a pipe is also a class. All are TypeScript classes. Then how compiler knows that it is a service, it is a factory? All are created by using a TypeScript class. All are created by using a TypeScript class. That means the point here is simple actually. The point here is, suppose we have a class called sorting, and we have a class called some data, get data. So, or say API data, like this. This is a class. Now, very important, actually, this is a pipe. That means it is used for sorting, filtering, formatting, and all. That is a pipe. And this is a service. This is a service. How compiler knows? Both are TypeScript classes only. Then how does a compiler knows that this is pipe, this is service, this is factory, this is component? For example, so we have class called login, and this login is actually a component. It is a component. That means how the compiler knows? For that we need a directive. Directive is a marker. Used for classes to tell the compiler what it is. That means directive contains metadata. Directive contains metadata about framework components. Framework component related metadata is present in directive. Metadata means information about that component given to whom? Compiler. Information about the component is given to compiler by using a directive. And if this is a pipe, we have a directive called pipe. This directive will tell, it is a marker. We have to mark this class with this pipe directive. Now compiler can understand that this is a pipe. And this directive can have some attributes that tells the compiler detailedly about what it is. If it is a service, it is a service. So it uses provider. It uses provider. Service uses various things. Service uses a provider. Service uses an actually injector. It uses an injectable. If it is showing injectable, that means it is a service. If it is a component, then it will have a component. It will have a component marker. If it is a module, it will have an ng module. If it is a module, it will have an ng module. Ng module means Angular module. That means what is the role of a directive? To tell the compiler what this is, because everything is a TypeScript class. Everything is a TypeScript class. Then how compiler understands? So that is the reason you can see here there is ng module, and remember this ng module is a decorator for this class. Understood? The class name is what? Class name is app module, and this is the decorator for that module. This is the directive which tells that this is a module. Generally, what a module can contain, module contains components, services, and everything. And components and pipes are defined in declarations. Components and pipes are defined in declarations. If you want to use any component, if you want to use any pipe in a module, those must be registered in declarations. Components, pipes are registered in declarations. Services are registered in providers. Services are registered in providers. That means which service this module have to use. Those services are registered in providers. Imports contains modules. A module can use some other modules. The modules can be defined inside imports. That means actually several more things will come later. So technically every module initially contains declarations, imports, providers. And yesterday I have explained, if you remembered, bootstrap means which component to start with. Means converting the static DOM into dynamic. Which component to start with? That is bootstrapping. Already yesterday I told you bootstrapping means converting the static DOM into dynamic DOM. That means it is asking which component to start with. And interestingly, all are arrays. By seeing that, what you can understand, that a module can contain many components. A module can contain many modules inside. A module may contain many services. A module may start with many components. Many times in interviews, this question asked for even experienced people, can we start with multiple components? Right? You can start with any number of components. It's not that every application starts with only one component. By default, it is starting with only one. But clearly it is telling that it is an array. Array means it will allow multiple. So every component in a framework is designed with a class. Then how does compiler understands? So by using markers, and those markers we call them as directives. That means, now what is a directive? Directive contains metadata of component which is used by compiler, to understand the role and responsibility. Understand the role and responsibility. So directive contains metadata, so which is used by compilers to understand the role and responsibility of the class that you design. Is it to work like a module? Is it to work like a component? Is it to work like a pipe? That means we define like this: pipe, it is used for pipes. We have a component, it is used for components. We have injectable, so this is used for services. And we have ng module, this is used for modules. That is important. Now, another important point is Angular app.module.ts contains configuration for application, framework components, where you will see three important things here. What are those? Declarations. What is declarations? It is a collection of components and pipes. Collection of components and pipes are defined in declarations. You have declarations at the top. Next you have imports. Imports is a collection of modules. Next we have providers. It is a collection of services. And there we have bootstrap, the component. It contains collection of components to start with. These are all the important things you will see in app module. So remember one thing, you created 20 components. Remember, I already told you Angular is modular. You created 20 components, but you are using only 5 components for the current situation. Then you may create 20 components, but you register only 3 components or 5 components inside declarations. Only those components will be used by application. Others are ignored. That means you may have any number of components in your application. All components will not work until or unless they are registered in app module. Everything framework related, anything must be registered in the app module. Sometimes without registering in the app module also we can load them. We call that eager loading. But eager loading is always harmful for application. It uses more memory. That means I will show you some techniques that, so when we are using services without defining them in app module, we can load them directly. Because some framework components can individually work. When they can individually work, we can load them independently and make them available before this is ready. That is possible. That you will see later while working with that. So In Angular, anything you create, it must be registered here. It must be registered here. That is the basic rule that you have to register in app module.ts, right? So let's see how this is going to work, the process, how it is going to deal with and handle. So now previously, one more important you need to know is any component means that is directive. Another important option you need to know is how, another frequent question is how a component is injected into page. How a component is injected into page. Actually, component is injected into page. Component injected into page by using its selector, provided as directive. This is important. As I already told you, later we will learn about directives. Later we will discuss about directives more detailedly, right? So, but here, how component is injected into the page, how components are injected into the page. Actually, see, when I told you about directive, I told you only one part about directive. That means directive is used to tell the compiler about the component. So it contains metadata. Directive contains metadata. But actually, directive have a lot of other behaviors. Directives have a lot of other behaviors. Not only this, directive have a lot of other behaviors. Later in detail directive concept, I will tell you actually. Generally, remember in Angular, directive means directive, it can do lot of things. Directive, it can return markup. Directive, it can extend markup. It can extend markup. Directive, it can make markup. It can make markup interactive. A directive can do three things. So it can return markup, it can extend markup, it can make the markup effectively, more interactive. Actually, so many things a directive can do. For example, see, generally returning markup means, see, directive can be used in several ways. Returning markup means, here we will write a directive like this, app root. What this directive is going to do, this is directive. That means now I return directive. Remember another point here, a directive can be, one more option I will give. A directive can be used as, a directive can be used as element, it can be used as attribute also. A directive can be used as element, a directive can be used as attribute. See, here I am using directive as an element because paragraph is an element, bold is an element, img is an element. I am using this as an element. What is the purpose of using directive as an element? Its purpose is to return markup. Directive returns markup when it is used as an element. It returns markup when it used as an element. Now sometimes directives are used to extend markup. For example, suppose I have an image and or I have a text box, input type is equal to text box. Now whatever value entered in the text box, I need to collect and store dynamically in the memory so that I can use it later. Then I will use a directive called ngModel. It is a directive which will make this text box dynamic. Without this, it is static. Once I give this, it becomes dynamic. Now what directive is doing here? Is it returning markup? Directive is not returning markup. What this directive is doing, it is extending markup. Already markup is doing a work. Already input type text, it is text box. What ng model is doing inside it? It is extending the markup and making it dynamic. That means now I am using directive. Now tell me, is it used as an element? Is it element? It is not used as an element. It is used as an attribute. A directive has several behaviors. A directive can work like an element. A directive can work like an attribute. If it is working like an element, it returns markup. If it is working like an attribute, it extends markup. A directive can do so many things. A directive can even make markup interactive. Interactive means, for example, suppose we are having a div. We are having a div. You can have a directive ng style which can apply some effects dynamically. Which can apply some effects dynamically. Style means, you know, style is used for define ng style or ng class. These directives are used for making the element more effective, interactive. So directive have a lot of roles. Directive have a lot of roles. These you will see when we detailedly learn about directive. This is just only brief outline I given. Now why I discussed this, because the point is by using the selector provided, that means you have index.html. In this index.html, you have a body section. Now in the body section, I need to inject a component. we have a component called login. Login is a component. Generally, what is that login component? How we say that it is a component? To say that it is a component, we use this directive na component. Now this will tell, so how this class can be accessed and injected. Actually, it uses a selector. Selector indicates how to access app root. Understood? That means how you can access this login in the index page. To access that login, for example, it is given as app login. How to access this login? By using this selector. What is the selector name? App login. It should return the markup. That means we write like an element, app login. Like this we write. That means now what it is going to do? It is going to inject that component into your index page. That means whatever this component is going to deliver, it is going to display here. It is going to display here. The logic, the styles, the markup, everything is presented inside this. This is how your Angular application works actually. That means we design components and we inject them into index. That is the reason you see here in our project, which component is starting? App component. You see here, this is the app component code. You see the selector is app root. The selector for app component is app root. And you observe here, app component is having HTML. And this is the markup it is going to return. So much markup is there. This is all markup that app component is returning. So what I will do here, I will remove it. I will just keep a div. I will keep an header here. And I will say heading. I will say shopping. So Angular site, Angular app. And just I will keep here some style. So some border, some 2 pixel. So I given like this. So solid, some red. And I just given here some padding as 5 pixels. I'm just giving here some options, some background color. background color, I am adding some color yellow, something like, and say color some red, all these, that text align, I am using center, I am using all the CSS part. Now this is what the markup I have designed in the app component. And how to access this app component? Go to index page. In index page, here in the body, we have to access app component. How to access app? What is its selector name? Root. That is the selector name. We are injecting that component here. Now let's run the project and see what to do. Ng serve project is equal to, what is the project? Shopping. That is what the shortcut here I am doing. Serve we can use yes, ng s. Yesterday I told you ng serve. We can just use s for serve. And project is shopping. Now it will start with index page. Index page will start with app component. Now what you have to learn in Angular? How to design your own components. So the first step we are going to see in Angular is how we can work with Angular components. Means what are components, how they are designed, how they are used. This is the first step in Angular. These are the building blocks for Angular application. So in Angular, we are going to start with designing of components, right? So it is compiling. Let it compile. The process we will see step by step. That means how we create our own component, how to keep in the startup, how to bootstrap, how to deliver that component in the index page. This we will see. As of now, what we are doing, we are using ready-made component which is already available in your application. Application comes with a component called app component. And we are delivering that, and you can see it is ready. Let's make a request, compiled successfully, then localhost 4200, and this is the component page. That means this is the app component which is going to display. That's what we designed in the markup. Now we are going to see how to design our own components. How we can build an application by using components, right? And every Angular application is built with components. For example, I will show you here. We have, suppose like Instagram or Netflix. Netflix is a component based project. It's a component based application. Netflix, Amazon, all these are component based. Suppose I am opening this Netflix. In this Netflix, you see at the top, this is header component. That means header component contains these two things, right side, this in the left side. And this is register component. This is main component. And remember, this is register component. The component we can reuse. Register component. Register component, observe carefully. If I want this again, then you see it is used somewhere again here. We don't need to redesign. We have to just reuse the components. We build components. We use the components. I hope you know the name of this component you are watching. What is its name? Frequently asked questions. Can you name this component? What is the name of this component? Any idea? Web designers, HTML, CSS. This component is called accordion. We call this as accordion. This is accordion. You click, it will expand. And you click the second one, previous one will collapse and second one will expand. This is called accordion. It's a component. Right? That means application is about designing components. Now we will try to design such components and build a page. We will see how to design components and build a page. We will try to do this Netflix page by using components. First we will learn about components, then we will try to build this by using that components. That's easy. That is beginner level example. This is not complicated, right? This is very beginner level example to design this kind of pages, right? We will try to build that by using components. For that, we need to detailedly learn the components that we'll see next session, right? So next session, we'll have session tomorrow. Tomorrow, okay for everyone? Same time. Tomorrow, same time, we will have the session, right? So that because we already have some holidays, so we will cover up that by using tomorrow session. So tomorrow we will start learning how to build the application, right? Practically. Tomorrow will continue, right? So